What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Hope everybody has had a great start to their Wednesday morning. We got a makeup show for you since I was sick last week. I told you guys I would do everything in my power to make up for the lack of content. Here we are fulfilling it. We'll have some more written content coming out in the next couple of days as well. I am still sick, so bear with me if at some point we got to mute for 30 seconds while I hack up a lung. We actually made it fairly seamless through yesterday's show. There were a couple of small instances here and there, but I've been putting down the cough medicine like crazy. So hopefully we'll be good. Fingers crossed. We've got a lot to get into. I'm excited. We're going to have Steve Ivy, a.k.a. Swole Cracker, on the show. He'll come on at about 11:30, about halfway through. We'll pick his brain on CSU men's basketball. We'll ask him, how he feels about how this first-year staff is doing, what he feels like the team is lacking, where they go from here, all of that. We'll pick his brain on the rest of the league because there's really nobody around that follows the Mountain West basketball scene as well as Steve does. Maybe Jeff Grammer, I suppose, but it's definitely a part of the content area. He's really taken up that space well, and it's been cool to see. Always fun when we have him on, so I know you guys are going to enjoy that. I'm going to talk about some random stuff. I'll talk about whether maybe CSU football should consider the possibility of scheduling a week 0 game or not. Here at the beginning, I did just briefly want to say thank you to anybody that's supported the newsletter over the last couple of years. That's going to be going away as a network at ALLCITY. They decided we're not doing newsletters anymore, but I do appreciate everybody that supported that. I got quite a bit of positive feedback, so I appreciate y'all. I know there are some people who probably had no interest in it because it didn't necessarily have anything to do with CSU. But if you did read it even once, much love. I appreciate you supporting that endeavor. What I don't love are Hall of Fames just across the board. I feel like it's become such a silly process. I've ranted so many times about how ridiculous it is that Sonny Lubick is not in the College Football Hall of Fame. I think based on how they tweak the rules for Mike Leach, had he literally won like one more game, he would be in. For it to be that subjective is just absurd, mostly because you look at what he did at CSU. It was unprecedented. The guy did things that, frankly, nobody did before and nobody's been able to do since. Was a national championship winning defensive coordinator, at Miami. Sonny's my hero. I ramble about that multiple times a year. You guys know that deal. But the fact that Bill Belichick wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer, that's asinine. What are we doing here? If your voters are deciding that an 8-time Super Bowl champion, 6 times as a head coach, is not worthy of being a first ballot inductee, then nobody should be a first ballot Hall of Famer for the rest of time. The concept should just go away altogether, because if Bill isn't, then who is? And I understand that the Patriots had plenty of scandal associated with the organization over the years, Spygate, which, to be honest, so many teams have had similar things. It's just really the Patriots that kind of get pinned on that one. Deflategate, all that other stuff. I get it, but he is undoubtedly the greatest NFL coach in history. And if that guy is not a first ballot Hall of Famer, why do you even have a Hall of Fame in the first place? I was truly baffled by that. Like, it was kind of a hilarious day in general for NFL news. Shedeur Sanders makes the Pro Bowl. Bill Belichick is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. What type of upside down, bizarro world are we living in? That's just 2026 in a nutshell. I guess common sense goes out the window. It left me speechless. Like, I genuinely cannot believe that you would, for whatever reason, even if you truly despise the dude, and as a Broncos fan, I hate the Patriots about as much as anyone. I just don't see how you can justify that with a straight face. You cannot tell the history of the NFL without Belichick, and I know he'll get in, but just the fact that these voters are being petty enough, and it sounds like Bill Polian was a big part of it, and now he's kind of trying to walk it back. If you're going to be so petty as to lead the campaign to keep a guy out that you truly hate, at least do it with your whole chest. Don't then try and, shy away from it once public outrage sets in, because the public was rightfully mystified. And I just keep looking at these Hall of Fames across the board in sports. And what's the point? Mike Shanahan's still not a Hall of Famer. Won back-to-back Super Bowls. His coaching influence, like, look at his coaching tree and the influences of his offense in modern football. You can't tell the modern story of the NFL without, people like Mike Shanahan, certainly without Belichick. Sonny Lubic's not in the College Football Hall of Fame. Barry Bonds, I know he's a cheater, but he's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He's so clearly the greatest hitter that's ever lived, whether you use steroids or not. Like, I just, if you're not going to have the best of the best in, or you're going to have it be some silly process where you drag it out for years and years and years as a way to, I don't know, subject your own beliefs on someone, it just feels silly. And again, I just can't support anybody who would argue that these people aren't willing. Like, what are we doing here? What's the point of having a Hall of Fame? Thank you for letting me get that off my chest. If you missed it, there are some changes coming to the college football playoff format. Apparently, the group of 6 representative, and technically there can be more than one team from the group of 6, as we know, but there has to be at least one. No longer has to be a conference champion, apparently. That was not worded or publicized in a way that was widespread. I don't even think a lot of the schools necessarily recognized it, and it sounds like the power conferences are still being kind of ambiguous as far as how this is all going to work. But I guess now just the highest rated team from the group of 6 period is who's going to get a playoff bid. There are pros and cons to that. I kind of like the idea of having to win your conference championship and earn your way in. I also understand the idea of weird stuff can happen in the championship game. You could have a team who ran the table up to that point, end up losing that game to somebody who snuck in with 3 or 4 losses. And then now all of a sudden you might be costing what is actually, the most formidable team from the G6 a shot at the playoff because they had to play the extra game in the conference championship. But I also just feel like there's something to be said about winning your league and earning it, the old fashioned way, and kind of stamping your ticket through, winning a conference title. So that'll be interesting. I think it's surely going to make for a lot of interesting debate, especially if you end up, with the situation where there is a team who has a phenomenal regular season and for whatever reason comes up short in that conference title game. Would they give, an 11-2, a 12-1 Boise State, who was not a conference champion, a bid over a 10-2 Memphis, who won the American, which probably isn't going to be quite as strong top to bottom? I don't know, but I am very interested to see how all of this plays out in the end. I also am I'm interested to see what happens with targeting. They're going to review it, potentially make the infraction less punitive. Basically, that means ejections and suspensions could go away. That process could be modified. They're calling way less targeting than ever before. So I think it would be good to make it a little bit less damaging, guys having to potentially miss, an entire next game or the first half of a game if you get suspended or kicked out in the second half. I just felt like it was always a little bit dramatic, especially considering how fast this sport is played. It's just never been more challenging to be a defender. All of the rules end up favoring the offense inherently. As is, I always felt like that one was especially unfair when it's already hard enough, to be a defender. Let's get into the stuff you actually want to talk about. Again, we'll have Steve Ivey on here in about 15, 20 minutes. I wanted to just briefly give a couple of thoughts on the Pac-12 2026 schedule. We've briefly discussed this at various points over the last couple of weeks, but obviously with the Pac-12 only having 8 football members at the moment, you only have 7 conference games, which leaves you with a couple of options. You can go the traditional route and get to that 8th conference game either through flex scheduling, which would basically be trying to prioritize the best possible matchups to increase, the viability of the Pac-12 receiving a CFP bid. Or you could do a home and home where, everybody plays one team twice, once at home, once on the road. That's probably the simplest solution, although I do think that optically it's probably the least satisfying if you're the Pac-12, and I think it also probably opens you up to the most mockery from the national level. That's what will get a lot of people saying things like, oh, they really didn't plan this through. Look, they're having to do this. What a joke. Some of that is maybe fair. Some of that also is kind of going to make me roll my eyes a little bit, because it really wouldn't be that big of a deal, especially if it was only a temporary thing. Like if this was going to be a year in, year out ordeal, I would have more beef with that. If it's a stopgap scenario, you got to do what you got to do to fill out the schedule right now. The other thing you could do is just do 7 conference games, and you could allow everybody to schedule a 5th non-conference opponent. Now that becomes somewhat challenging because there aren't that many teams at this stage of the process that are looking for a game, but there are still a few. And technically speaking, I think if the Pac-12, especially if they found a way to kind of conduct it together and assure everybody got one on the books, there are enough teams for everybody in the Pac-12 to schedule a 5th non-conference game. One of those options is potentially playing in week 0. And actually you have a couple of different options. If you went the week 0 route, you could still do the home and home option if you wanted to, instead of a non-conference opponent. As of right now, there aren't any Pac-12 teams scheduled to play week 0. That's August 29th. You could have the first of the doubleheaders, or of the home and home, I should say, be week 0 matchups. You could have the entire Pac-12 play that week, take advantage of a light slate. I think there's only 5 games right now, week 0. That could be an opportunity to seize, some exposure when there's not a lot of competition out. You're starting with a bang. You're getting everybody talking about this new league again. And again, you're getting to do so without having to line up against some of those bigger conferences, which potentially, could overshadow you, later on in the season. I also think from CSU's perspective, the concept of playing week 0 could be intriguing. It could also be unappealing to them, though. And part of that is, as of right now, you are going to play Wyoming, obviously, in the Jim Mora debut. And from a theatrical standpoint, from a storylines, I think that's about as exciting of a first matchup as you could have. It creates so much intrigue. The bronze boots on the line, when you factor in the Pac-12 Mountain West storylines on top of that, I mean, that's really juicy. And that's a big bang. That, people are going to be juiced for it. At the same time, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, because you have to win that game against Wyoming. If you are Jim Mora, you cannot afford to lose that one. If you're CSU, you can't afford to lose it. You need to start with some positive momentum in September, which has just been an issue for CSU over the last decade. I mean, we drilled it repeatedly going into last year, how important it was for CSU to come out of the gate hot. And obviously that didn't happen. Jay Norvell ends up getting fired. If you want this move to be considered a success, both the hiring of Jim Mora and the transition to the Pac-12, the only way to do that is by winning and by generating excitement and by getting the people on board. And I just wonder if there could be a benefit of potentially trying to schedule somebody else, and whether that's a Pac-12 opponent, again, like if the whole league decided to play week 0, or if they potentially added another non-conference matchup. And I'll throw out a couple of options here in just a second. Let me take a quick break and shout out a couple of our awesome partners, and then we'll get to Steve Ivey in just a couple of minutes here. All right, let me talk to you about the friends over at Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. They build durable legends that are destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, whether you are hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. There are 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from. Check out the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Again, remember, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides. And SUVs like the RAV4 and the Grand Highlander, they're so perfect for Colorado because obviously we've got to deal with just insane weather. In the first half of the AFC Championship, you could have been cruising clear as day. By the second half, it's a whiteout. You got to be prepared for anything, and Toyota is able to help you do that. They are dependable, they're durable, they're versatile, they're everything that you could want and more. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics. They are also the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. I also want to talk to you guys about Raising Cane's. Do you need a Cane's fix? Order at raisingcanes.com or the Cane's mobile app, where every chicken finger is hand battered and cooked to order just for you. Every crinkle cut fry comes from grade A premium potatoes. Each thick sliced Texas toast is lightly brushed with Cane's garlic butter blend and grilled on the griddle to golden brown perfection. And most importantly, where the secret recipe Cane's sauce is made in restaurant every single day. Fix those hunger cravings on the go, now on the Cane's mobile ordering platform. Raising Cane's chicken fingers, one love. All right, shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat rocking with us. I appreciate the engagement. I appreciate everybody keeping it polite as well. We are going to get to Steve Ivey in just a second here. I know he's been hanging out in the background. I appreciate his patience. We had just a couple of things we had to get to. Just kind of putting a bow on this whole concept of the 2026 schedule. I think if you're CSU, the most appealing way to kick off the Mora era is most certainly by beating Wyoming. I again just keep coming back to the concept of there being so much pressure on it. Now, if it goes well, that's huge. I mean, I think back to being in Denver in 2012 for the Rocky Mountain Showdown and, being able to win an admittedly incredibly ugly game against the Buffs and in the Jim McElwain debut. But when you start with a rivalry win, the rejuvenation that does for your fan base is just next level. I mean, it had everybody bought in. That season didn't end up being all that fun. I think they lost to North Dakota State at home, an FCS team the very next week. But because you started by beating a rival, it was just so validating. You knew this is the guy. If he can win that game in that big moment, he's going to be able to do it. And obviously, things worked out very favorable for the CSU football program under Jim McElwain, as far as, starting with a bang if you're Mora, beating Wyoming in this Canvas Stadium, first non-conference matchup between the two teams. Like, that's about as good as it gets. But strategically, as a football team, would you rather play a tune-up game? I don't know. I also think that you could point out that because it's the border war, you're not going to have any issues selling tickets. But if you had a week 0 game at home, for instance, like you could potentially, have another sellout, just build on the idea of it being welcome to the Jim Mora, era. So there's something to consider from a business standpoint in that sense too. Again, if I had to guess, I still feel like the home and home option is probably the simplest and most likely outcome for the Pac-12. If that's the case, again, I would assume that it ends up being Texas State. Maybe it ends up being Utah State, depending on how some of the scheduling works. But I'm very interested. And Crest453 says, if we still have this issue, bring back the showdown. Brother, CSU is not the one who isn't willing to play the Rocky Mountain Showdown every year. That's firmly out of our control. If CU had it their way, we wouldn't play at all. So that's where we're at with them. I think CSU's down anytime, any place. So the Buffs would like to play. I'd love to see it. The fact that they're not going to play until 2029 is frankly a joke. And it's another example of everything that's wrong with college football today and just college sports in general. Just a lack of common sense rooted in the pursuit of greed. And that's where we're at. That's what drives the decisions. Some teams CSU could play week 0, just throwing them out potentially. One that's really juicy. I don't know if they'd want to do it. You could play UConn. UConn needs a 12th game as well. How about that? Have the Jim Mora rematch against the Huskies and Jason Candle, who they brought over from Toledo. As far as like just the random FBS opponents go, that's probably the most interesting to me. I think it would be fun. Even if you went on the road, like that would be an interesting way to, generate a lot of buzz. I think that would be a game that would pick up some national attention, would have some intrigue. You could play USC, which I don't love. I don't think playing, another Michigan, Texas type opponent right off the bat and getting your teeth kicked in is a very fun way to begin a season. And I kind of think we'll see less and less of that as we progress here, especially, in the Pac-12 era where you're trying to optimize your chances of making the playoff. But a couple of other teams that they could play theoretically: Kent State, South Florida, Florida International, Jacksonville State, and Southern Miss. So not a ton of super juicy or appealing options, but they do have options on the table technically. And the Pac-12, if they all worked expeditiously here, they could get it done in a way where every single one of these teams is able to add a fifth non-conference member rather than, or non-conference game rather than, playing another conference opponent. So we will see what happens with all of that. I still feel like having the opener be against Wyoming in the border war is from a business standpoint and from a storyline standpoint, probably the most appealing route if you're CSU. But some of this obviously is going to be dictated too by just what the entire league decides. Like if the Pac-12 decided, hey, that was a pretty good idea that J Mike had, maybe we should have the entire league play week 0 and then capitalize on a pretty light schedule. That could be interesting too. The negative of that is it sucks to lose a conference game before you've even gotten to September. And if you do that, you're putting half your league in that position. So something to keep an eye on. I will be curious to see what happens with all that scheduling. Again, I still just keep coming back to it would have been so much more ideal to have landed Memphis or be able to have added another football member. I do wonder if there are some people in the Pac-12 circles who ask themselves, should we have taken a New Mexico with us? You see the way that program is trending in the right direction on the football side. They still have a lot of room to go as far as athletic investment and upgrades and facilities go, but competitively and from a fan support standpoint, like I think they could have been an interesting option. Obviously, geographically, they make a ton of sense. They're a great basketball brand. I'm still big on the idea of the Pac-12 being an elite basketball conference. That would just be another great brand on top of it. And frankly, I just have a soft spot for Albuquerque in general. Good people down there. The food's awesome. I like UNM. It's a brand that I've always been kind of a fan of. And I think some of that has to do with, if I'm being real, while I understand that UNLV, because of the whole Vegas rise in the sports scene, would be probably the most appealing Mountain West member if you were to get somebody else, I'm kind of over them. I don't know. They feel a little too big for their britches of late. All the talk of, oh, we're going to get in the Big 12. Okay, sure. is Santa going to bring it for you guys? Like if Memphis couldn't buy their way into the Big 12 with $500 million, what is your broke ass athletic department and no regional or local support going to bring to the table to the Pac 12 or the Big 12, excuse me? Nothing, not a thing. You also don't need UNLV for access to Vegas. So that's my 2 cents on it. But a lot of moving parts at the moment. It is going to be interesting to see kind of how this all plays out. We're going to get Steve Ivy on here. Let me just real quick set the scene for this San Diego State game, then we'll get him on. The Aztecs 14-5, 8-1 in league play. They've been playing really good ball of late, although they did drop a tough one at GCU again. That win in Phoenix looks better and better for the Rams by the week. At the moment, I don't know if it felt to the masses like it was all that big of a deal, but it truly was one of the more impressive true road wins we've seen in the league this year. They've been formidable against everyone. The Aztecs 9-1 at home, with the loss surprisingly coming to Troy back in November. It was a 2 OT game. They've played a couple of multi-overtime games, already played a triple overtime game against Boise that they were able to pull out. This is a really good team. They're not going to have Magoon Guat tonight, which is a huge thing for CSU. That guy is a monster. But they've got plenty of other depth to go around. I mean, they're really well balanced. They've got a lot of length. They're shooting the 3 ball a lot better than we'd seen the last couple of years. And they're pretty well balanced in the sense that they're not dependent on one individual to shoulder the entire workload. You know, they got 6 players averaging between 8 and 11 points per game. And it's just always one of the toughest settings that you can go into. You know, I would say that in any game against San Diego State and Viejas, you know, you are going to give up at some point what feels like a suffocating run, you know, a 10, 12-point run where the crowd gets going and they're blocking shots and they're turning you over and they're getting dunks in transition the other way. Can you withstand that? Because if you can, like this Aztecs team has shown, they can be beatable, but they are playing pretty good basketball right now, and they still are the same overwhelming defensive brand that we've always known them to be. Average about 8 steals and 5 blocks per game for a CSU team that has had some ball control issues that at times has seemed a little small in the paint as well. That's definitely worrisome, and that's why my Xfinity X Factor, this is the Xfinity X Factor presented by Xfinity. Imagine that, is Rashawn Bemba. I just feel like Rashawn Bemba's physicality is going to be so important in a matchup like this. If he can stay out of foul trouble, if he can give CSU 25 minutes, which is asking a lot of him, I like the Rams' chances so much more of being competitive in this game than if he gets into foul trouble or can't stay on the floor. I just feel like his presence completely changes the spacing on both sides of the court. Now they've shooken some things up with the rotation of late, and I'm really looking forward to picking Steve's brain on all that. But Bemba has to come up big, I would say, really in both these road games if the Rams are going to have a chance of even splitting, which at this point you'd really love to see, because you lose 4 or 5 in a row. It's tough to come back from, and you've got to find a way to avoid finishing in the bottom half of the league and having to play day 1 in the Mountain West tournament, because it's basically the kiss of death. That was the Xfinity X Factor presented by Xfinity. Imagine that. Cool. Let's get our boy Steve Ivy on the show. Been looking forward to this. Been meaning to have him on for a while. As my guy Taylor in the Toyota chat says, 2 goats on one show. What a day. What is this? A crossover episode? Steve, how you doing, my man?
Justin, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I there's one goat here, and then there's an old goat.
Well, I said it earlier, and I'm not just trying to butter you up because you're my buddy or because you're doing me a solid by coming on today. But I truly feel like you are one of the most invested voices in mid-major college basketball, but most certainly the Mountain West scene. It's been really cool to see your show grow. If you guys are not tuned into what Steve's been doing, you're missing out. He's going live post-game, every CSU game. I mean, I've done that in years past. It takes dedication. So first of all, shout out to you. Been cool to see. but we do kind of have to take some medicine because the Rams are struggling. I guess let's start with that Utah State game. Just what was your biggest takeaway? Because I mean, it's there for the taking, and obviously the turnovers are just maddening. But that one really felt like a gut punch, and felt like a win there just would have been so big from a momentum standpoint.
Yeah, it certainly would have been big. And, I was hoping it was my birthday and I was hoping for a birthday present. And, the thing, Justin, that I left with was, I did my post game show and a lot of people use the word depressing, and just all different kinds of that. And I wasn't depressed as much as I was just absolutely puzzled and confounded by how the Rams conjured up a way to toss that game away. They had played so well, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here, Utah State, take the ball, go dunk it. Here, take the ball, go dunk it. And it was one after another, and we're just sitting there, and there was no one. I mean, everybody was just flat out shocked because they had played so well. And my takeaway was when you looked at the numbers, when you looked at it after the game, the Rams played a really good game for 30 of those minutes. They defensively, it was probably their best defensive performance of the year in the half court. They held a good Utah State offense to probably about 50 points, other than handing them 15 points. It was their Utah State's third worst offensive performance of the season, and we gave them at least 15 points, and it would have been easily the best performance of the season against Utah State. They're a good team. Right now they're an NCAA tournament team, and so you watch it and you go, that this is just crazy what's going on. And that was kind of my takeaway was they tossed the game. They played well enough to win. They played well enough to win by 15 or 20 points, and they somehow conjured up a way to toss it.
You can't lose if you're this team when you hit 10 threes at home. Like that's winning basketball. You played good half court defense, as you mentioned. I think that's been one of the things that's been tough with this team is it's not like they're incompetent. It's not like they've been a disaster in league play, but they just keep finding ways to blow these winnable games. Fresno was there for the taking. You find a way to fight back against Boise. You can't seal the deal. Nevada, I felt like, was kind of similar to the Utah State game where you played pretty good defense against a team who has multiple scoring options. They completely shut down Nevada's top two guys in that game. But the turnovers and the second chance points, and especially the just sloppy pass turnovers, I think for those, like after watching Isaiah and Neek and some of these guys for so many years, we're a little bit spoiled. But like, man, some of these passes you would expect, JV guards to be able to make. And when some of your top playmakers are just lackadaisically throwing it across the middle and it's leading to pick sixes the other way, it's tough. And it's a little frustrating that it's happening at this stage of the season still.
Yeah, but let me mention one thing, and this is kind of the learning experience for this team. I had a coach once explain to me that anybody at this level can score 20 points a game if they don't play defense. And I think our guys are all capable of scoring 20 points a game, but I don't know if they know what it takes to play all 94 feet when you put so much effort out on the defensive side. And they did that against Utah State. Maybe that's what led to the turnovers. They just weren't ready to play on the offensive side. And some of these guys have to learn. It's a 94-foot game at this level. And so while it was discouraging, maybe it's a step in the right direction. We had three guys combined for 15 turnovers. You had Jorgensen, Recksteiner, and Muniz. And just crazy that it happened that way. But like I said, maybe they're learning. I also think, Justin, part of what happened in that game against Utah State was Ali rode Mbemba and Jorgensen very, very heavily Kyle played the most minutes he's ever played in a game. Rashawn played the most minutes he's ever played in a game, and I think they were dead tired at the end. I don't think we saw enough of Augie Kiadulis during the game. We didn't see Augie the entire second half, and I think that might have helped a little bit as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because I've been interested in how the rotation's been tweaked of late these last couple of weeks or so. Obviously, they're bringing Jev off the bench now, which I think makes sense. It gives you some offensive creation and somebody who can facilitate off the bench, so it maybe doesn't become quite as stagnant. But Kerry Booth has seen a pretty drastic dip in his minutes over the last 3 games. He and Augie, as you mentioned, both didn't play much of a factor in that Utah State game. Is that surprising to you at all? Like, what do you feel about Kerry Booth's role being reduced of late?
Well, it's kind of two. It goes two ways. His role has been reduced, but part of it's on him. Sometimes he's been getting lost offensively. Sometimes he may be not getting that tough rebound, and the like. But I'd like to see more of him, and I'd like to see more of Augie. I think one of the strengths of this team. So there's a lot of balance. They've got 9 guys that can really play. We've got 4 guys in the forecourt, and that doesn't even include Nikola Joppa, who was capable of giving 5 to 8 good minutes in a game last year. He's behind those other 4, and we have 2 others besides Rashawn and Kyle that I think can add a lot. And so I don't think it's just Carey. I'd like to see more of Carey. I'd love to see them run more stuff to get Carey the ball shooting wide open threes from the corner where he's deadly. And it seems they come accidentally. They don't come out of the set offense. And then with Augie, we saw what Augie could do when Kyle and Rashawn were both missing, and Augie was starting to play really, really well, and he's capable of playing really good, solid minutes. And I just don't think Ali has figured out the rotation of his bigs yet. And part of that might be he just wants to play Rashawn and Kyle more and more. He sees that as critical to the growth and development of this team and being at their best by March. But I think we're giving up a little by excluding Augie and Carey at the present time.
This is a loaded question that you can take a lot of ways, but one of the things that I mentioned just briefly in the 10 minutes or so that I talked about hoops yesterday was that you felt the loss of Nico Medved this season. And I don't mean that as an indictment of Ali. That's not me saying I think he's a bad coach. I think he was the wrong hire. I wholeheartedly support hiring Ali Farokhmanesh, and I genuinely believe that he's going to be a terrific Division I men's head basketball coach. But it has felt like we've seen moments of this being a first-year staff. And so I'm curious, just what are your thoughts on what you've seen as far as, you know, the coaching goes in this first year in the program?
I'm with you on that some. Not that Nico was perfect managing games. There were times when I'd pull my hair out when it was some of the decisions he made. But Ali is a first-year coach. If anybody who watches me knows, I'm 100% behind Ali. I think he's going to be a superstar in this business, but he is a first-year coach. I also believe that 90% of the games are won in practice the 2 days before they play the game. And I've been to enough practices, and I know how good this staff is, and I know how good Ali is, and I watch the meticulous level that they prepare at. And so, for example, the Utah State game, they added some things defensively to guard Utah State's actions where they completely shut down Mason Falslev, who's the best player in the Mountain West. They held him to 9 points. And so I watched the preparation, and I know lots of good things are going on. But the in-game stuff, I'm not sure he has a feel yet. You would hope at this time we've played basically 20 games. I'm not sure he has a feel yet for his personnel at any given time during the game. I think sometimes his substitutions can be a little robotic as opposed to necessarily calling it, putting the right player in at the right time. I've been highly, I won't say critical, but One of the concerns I've had is when I watch, I'm going to use this as an example, and this isn't meant to call the young man out, but JoJo McIver, a freshman guard, has really struggled in Mountain West play. He's played every Mountain West game, 9 of them. He's only scored in one of them, Justin. He also has a very, very high turnover rate. The only game he scored in was against Air Force. Well, that's like a D2 school. And so the question is whether JoJo is really ready to play at this level. And I've seen JoJo in practice be very, very effective. For some reason, it's not working in games. But at some point, my concern is Ali is so much into the development of JoJo McIver, it may be coming at the expense of winning basketball games.
That's interesting and not something that I thought about, but I've certainly been surprised that JoJo has not flourished a little more by this stage of the season. I think that the ceiling is there. He's a highly gifted basketball player, and that goes on both ends of the floor. I still think the potential is there, and I understand wanting to lean on that. But I mean, yeah, I just don't think he's been quite ready, and maybe we'll see the rewards of that be reaped down the line. Maybe he ends up having some big moments, late February, March going into the Mountain West tournament. And that'd be huge for this team and for the future. But I do wonder if you're right, if there's maybe a little bit too much being invested in trying to develop this guy who they have a lot of stock in and certainly would love to see be the next day. But at some point, you do have to focus on the here and now because it is a different standard. Ali talked about it when he came in. This isn't coming in post Stacy and inheriting just a dumpster fire of a program. Like, the expectation was to compete again and to push for another NCAA tournament. I don't think you came into this season with the mentality of NCAA tournament or busts, like it's a failure had Ali not been able to make it in year one. If you end up going sub 500 though in the league, I do think those are the types of things you look back on and kind of scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah, it's the thing. Like I said, I think the world of Ali, and I really think that he's doing his best. He's making decisions as best he can to try and keep this team, make them win. He doesn't like losing. None of us do. He hates
nobody
it.
Does.
They're 3-6. Nobody expected us to be 3-6 right now. I knew the schedule was front loaded. I knew there was a chance they could go about 5-5, but I did not expect 3-6 with the trip to Viejas, upcoming, place, kind of a house of horrors. So we've reached that kind of that stage where he's gotta figure out his rotations. He did make the move, moving Jev to come off the bench and moving Jace Butler into the starting lineup. That was an interesting move, and I could argue it either way. Jev has been our kind of our leading assist guy, but it was also good to get a guy coming off the bench who could help drive some offense. It seemed like we had nothing going on offense when we went to the bench before. Butler also adds a lot defensively. He's been probably our best perimeter defender. But the other thing, and some of the things are starting to pay off, Justin. I've seen, even though Rex Steiner had his worst game against Utah State, he started to play. He was playing very, very well going into that game. It was a bit of a shock to me that he played so poorly. I've been calling for him to get more minutes. And of course, at that time, he chose to put up a stinker. But the other one is Josh Pasquarelli has improved tremendously on the defensive end, and I thought he played his best game of the season. Not overall against Utah State, he was very, very good defensively. He was very, very good. He's learning that he can't when he's not open. He's learning how to move without the ball, pass the ball, get open for shots, and his percentage has gone back up again since Jorgensen has come back. And the Rams are starting to shoot the ball better again now that Kyle is back. And so there's a lot of good things that are starting to happen too. And I'm encouraged by that, but things need to tighten up, I think.
I'm with you, and it is encouraging, obviously, to see the flow of the offense be so much more consistent when Jorgensen's out there. I mean, we've talked about this before, but it's not an easy role, and it's why they were so hyped on the idea of Bemba and Jorgensen coming back this year, is that's a role that takes guys time to figure out. And I do think that's important to remember as well. Like they've really played 4 games, I believe, with the intended roster that, like, if we would have done a preview show right before, November, like these are the guys, right? Like it has been a tough sequence having to deal, with the Bemba and Jorgensen injuries.
The other thing, and I brought this up last week on my post-game show, when they introduced the starting lineups, there aren't many teams where you see 2 sophomores and 3 juniors introduced in the starting lineup.
Yeah.
Okay, and we were going against Utah State, and Utah State had Drake Allen at the point, who's a 6th-year player. He got an extra year because he played at the JUCO level. Mason Falslev, who's a junior in eligibility, but 2 years of a LDS mission and 1 year of a red shirt. He's been out of high school 6 years. Zach Keller, 4th-year player. Who else did they? They just had nothing but 4th, 5th, and 6th-year players, and we're going against older guys in a lot of cases. And the teams that are at the top of the Mountain West, I'm going to leave New Mexico out of it. That's a whole different animal. But San Diego State, Utah State. Boise State is actually pretty old as well, and we've got a very, very young, inexperienced team, and they're actually it's a good team. They just haven't quite clicked yet, and it's just become one of those things where I think they're almost pressing so hard. One of the thoughts I had, I don't have a good answer to this, but one of the thoughts I had, Justin, is, this is a team, this is, in the Nico mode, very much a team together, and they really like each other, and they like the coaching staff. They love Ali. They really do. They love playing for him. They love playing hard for him. And make no mistake, they are playing hard for him. They're not playing like dogs. And I wonder if they're putting too much pressure on them, knowing that Ali is a first year coach, wanting to win so badly that they're just focused on maybe the wrong things instead of just the next play, the next play, the next play. I wonder if they still need to learn
That could
that.
be. And I mean, that's one of those things too that comes back to what you were saying about just the youth of this roster. A lot of these guys are this is the biggest minutes they've been playing in their career. It's the most substantial role they've had in a rotation, even from Bemba and Jorgensen making massive leaps and their responsibility, to guys like Rex-Steiner and Pasquarelli, and Jace Butler's a guy who wasn't playing at all for Washington really at the end of last season. He's one of the most important people in the rotation now, and I still think that come March, this is going to be a team that you wouldn't necessarily want to draw up against in Vegas because they have so many 3-point shooters. They're trending the right way defensively, which is encouraging and probably going to be the biggest reason they either, sink or swim at some point here down the line. But I am interested to see kind of what the response is this week, because you already said it. It's not an ideal time to be 3-6, having to go to Viejas and then Laramie, because I know Wyoming's kind of trending the opposite direction after looking kind of strong there for a little bit. Strong's a relative term, but I just don't think that's an easy place to win basketball games.
Yeah, I think this week is going to be an interesting week, and I'm hoping, maybe I'm nuts. I think we're going to be eating post-game snacks tonight. I really do. I see something in this team, and I think
Like it.
I think they're going to play well. I think they'll be better at holding on to the ball. Obviously, I mean, Utah State thrives on turnovers, and they know how to really run and get easy buckets out of turnovers. Unfortunately, San Diego State does the same, but I think we'll see a different CSU tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing the response. Make no mistake about it, San Diego State's the hottest team in the Mountain West right now. They are playing very, very well. Yes, they lost at Grand Canyon by 1 point, and Grand Canyon's been playing very, very well. That was a very, very tough loss that the Aztecs had, but they've only lost 1 game in conference, and they're playing well. Their schedule, it's a really interesting thing. Their schedule has been Aztecs. Their schedule has been front loaded. CSU front loaded easy, and CSU's has been front loaded more difficult. And so, if the Rams can come out of this week, if they can sneak a win out of Viejas and then get a win in the border war, and if they can get to to 5-6 after 11 games. If you look at their schedule, it gets potentially easier if they decide they want to head in that direction. And they don't have a Neek Clifford. You know, last year, well, I love to tell this story. Last year, I had Neek Clifford come on one of my shows. It was after they lost to Utah State. And Neek came on and humbly and quietly, you know how what he's like, right? It's just a great kid, humble, quiet, looked at me and said, "Steve, I don't think we're going to lose another game this year." And I started laughing, going, I started, in my back of my mind, what makes you think that? And they didn't lose another game until they lost to Maryland. And I'm not sure if this team is ready to make that kind of statement, but we'll know I think after this week, where this thing is headed.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a season defining stretch here. Even going 1-1 would be massive, but if you could somehow pull off 2 road wins, that completely changes the outlook of the season going into the final 5-6 weeks of the regular season. I do want to pick your brain a little bit more on the Mountain West as a whole. I saw somebody asked if we could do a power ranking. We could kind of quickly do one together.
Yeah, let's do that.
Before we do, though, I do want to put a bow on CSU, and I'm gonna ask you this. If the Rams finish in the top half of the Mountain West, so secure a day 1 bye of the tournament, then blank will have happened.
Oh gosh. Let me think about that. Coach will have figured out the proper rotation. Guys will play well within the bounds of that particular rotation. It's as simple as that. The talent is there. The depth is there. Justin, I had somebody mentioned they were getting vibes of the 22-23 team, and because that team figured out a way to lose games, just kind of like this one does. But it's very, very different because this roster makeup is so much better than that 22-23 team. They had no bigs. They had James Moores and Pat Cartier, who was just out of D2, who was skinny, trying to defend the post. We have 4 good bigs. We don't have an Isaiah Stevens, but we do have some good solid guards and good depth at the backcourt. This team is so much better than that 23 team. And so I think that's why we had
optimism, right? As you look at the roster, it's not a bad team. This isn't a team that should be. And I think that's where some of the frustration stems from, is it's like, man, we had so much more success when we had no depth, and now we've got a legit front court and we still can't figure it out.
Yep. And it's going to come down to the coaching staff and the team getting together, meshing together, being connected on both ends of the floor and being connected from bench to the players on the floor. That's what's going to come down to, I think.
I got an interesting question here. Is NIL a factor in rotations? IRF_12 wants to know, kind of like Norvell wanting to move off of BF or not wanting to move off of BFN. Do you think NIL factors into the rotations? I don't think it does.
I don't think, absolutely not. I would suspect that maybe at some other schools like UNLV. The player I've heard who gets the most money at UNLV is a guy who's probably the biggest dog in the Mountain West Conference, and I'll just mention his name, Kamani Hamilton. They're paying him a lot of money, and I'll tell a little story about their game last night. They got smoked by New Mexico. Their best player, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, fouled out early in the second half. At that point, Kamani Hamilton had 2 fouls. And my first thought was he'll figure out a way to foul out quickly. He was gone within like the next 3 minutes. He went from 2 fouls to 5 fouls, and he was on the bench with 13 minutes to go. I think he tried to foul out because he wanted no part of it. That guy, you never know he's going to show up. I think it matters for them. CSU, absolutely not. I have no idea what anybody's making, but I don't see any difference in terms of the way the coaching staff treats people and the way they play them based pretty much on how they're doing and how they're performing.
All right, let's try and build a power ranking on the fly. Do you want to start at the top or the bottom?
Oh, let's go bottom. I think it's
that's easy. Air Force.
Easy. Air Force, right? I feel for them. Thank God they're figuring out a way to do something with Joe Scott, because quite frankly, he's been the problem in that program. Players, he's blamed it on players leaving after the 2 years, first 2 years because of NIL opportunities. They're leaving because of him, and
they leave because he's a dick.
Yeah, they're leaving because of
Going
him, and
from
that they need.
Polopovich to him is like the worst vibe change of all time.
Yeah, so they need 4-year players. They can't keep 4-year players, and the one thing I noticed, they look sad when they came to Moby and play. They don't play with a lot of joy, and he sucked all the joy out of the program. So that's enough about Air Force. They have a chance now that they're going to be replaced. I believe they're going to replace. If they do an honest appraisal of the state of the program, there is no way Joe Scott is coming back.
I couldn't believe they brought him back in the first place. It was just one of the, it's like the Adazio hiring, one of those moves that just never made sense to me. Like, what are you doing? Um, I do think the next one is kind of interesting. Would you go San Jose or would you go Fresno?
I'd go San Jose State. I don't think there's any doubt at San Jose State. Injuries, not a lot of talent to begin with. A few good players, but they've been beat up. And, you know, you look at, they got absolutely smashed at home last night. They have one win, Air Force. That's it. So
They were kind of hanging around for a little bit until Boise turned it on in the second half.
until they decided to rebound. They out rebounded
Yeah.
like 20 to 3 in the second half. So, and then
Who would
we'll
you go next? I'd probably go
next.
Wyoming.
I would put Wyoming and Fresno pretty equal.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I see some things out of Wyoming, but I see slippage similar to what happened last year. Good start. And I'm going to do a show tomorrow night with a Wyoming guy who they have a YouTube channel, wyonation.com, and we'll talk about it. But I want to hear more about where they're at right now because they seem to be slipping. And Fresno is just so up and down with their style.
Mm-hmm.
They have some interesting players, but you just never know what you're going to get. They're a box of chocolates.
All right, so we've got Air Force 12, San Jose 11. We'll say Fresno 10, Wyoming 9, although you could flip either one of those, and I don't think you would get a ton of a pushback. UNLV, it's like, which UNLV are you getting?
Yeah.
Are you getting the UNLV beating a ranked team, or are you getting the UNLV that played the other night? Like, I briefly did one yesterday, and I had UNLV above CSU. Then you see them last night, and it's like, no, CSU would thump UNLV just like they did when they played. I think I got to go UNLV at 8.
I very much so. And again, a win in Logan by 10, outscoring the Aggies like 34 to 14 over the last 12 minutes. Just crazy. Then they go home. They play not good against San Diego State, but not bad. San Diego State was just playing good. They lose by a dozen, and then they just get smashed. They could have lost by 50 last night. It ended up being only 29, and that's who they are. They are the most bipolar team, and that program has been that way. And I have no idea what's going on in Las Vegas in the water because they are so bipolar. But I can't see putting them above 8. They're 5-4. They're ahead of a lot of teams in the Mountain West, but I just don't rate them.
I just don't trust them.
Yeah.
I get it. Like they'll beat a San Diego State type team, and then they'll lose to Fresno by 12. They're just a very confusing basketball program. Nobody is better at doing less with more than UNLV basketball in the 21st century.
Yep.
I think you got to go CSU 7, Boise 6.
Yeah, I'll talk about Boise in a second. CSU 7, obviously some upside, and we saw it. We saw it against Utah State. We saw it in the second half against Boise State. But they got to play 40 minutes. I can't put them any higher right now.
Agreed. Would you put Boise 6, or would you go GCU or Nevada?
Based on what I've seen the last week or two, I'd go Nevada 6. I didn't think they looked good. I have no idea how they won the game last night. Obviously, they were home playing at elevation, and Grand Canyon was short 2 players, and they somehow snuck an overtime win. They didn't look bad against New Mexico, but I don't see much upside. I think they've already kind of peaked, and I would put them behind Boise, to be honest with you. I like Boise in the 5th spot right now. They've won 4 in a row. They're playing softer teams, but I've thought all along that they would start playing better. They had the hardest schedule the first they showed it. They were 1-5 to start the season. Well, their first 6 games were brutal. Face it. So I think I put Boise 5 right now, and with an arrow going the right direction.
I tend to agree with you. I feel like Boise and CSU are the two teams who you could potentially buy low on, who end up being, pretty good investments come March, could be legitimate factors to win the Mountain West tournament.
Yep.
So then you go GCU, I assume?
GCU next. I like what I saw last night. Obviously, they had the 2 good home wins. But I liked what I saw last night on the road at Nevada, down 2 players. They out Nevada. They rebounded well. They defended the paint really well. They shot more free throws, and they have a big game this weekend against, they play Boise State in Phoenix, and that'll be an interesting game because Boise State lost by 15 up in Boise a few weeks ago. So I'm dying to see that game, and that'll be a good measuring stick for both programs right now.
That win in Phoenix looking more and more impressive by the week for CSU. That's the funny thing. You look at some of the wins they have; they're still pretty impressive.
Justin, I'm 2-0 on the road, and maybe CSU needs to pay me to go on the road. I've been to Loyola of Illinois. I've been to Grand Canyon. I'm 2-0. Both double-digit wins. Rams, you can pay my way.
Hey, do we want to win or not? Are we serious about winning? We've got to uncover all the stones here. We have gone over, so you can watch the rest of this podcast over at DNVR.com. The conversation continues there. This is overtime. All right, this is where it gets really interesting. I'm tempted to put Utah State third.
I'm with you. Based on my eyes, I watch games on TV, but I rely on what I've seen in person as well. And I think of all the teams that have come into Moby this year, I think New Mexico showed that they're a better team than Utah State. I just believe that. I think they're more connected on both ends of the floor. I love Eric Olin and the job he's doing, and so I'd definitely Utah State. I'd put them behind New Mexico. I think you're spot on.
Well, that gives us UNM 2 and San Diego State 1, which I think San Diego State has to be the top spot based on how they've been playing of late. I do think New Mexico's dangerous, though, and I think if the Mountain West ends up being a multi-bid league, I think they've got a really good opportunity to be the potential, third team in that mix. I still think Utah State, based on their non-conference resume, is in a strong spot to get an at-large bid if they don't win the league. But it's been cool to see New Mexico really figure it out here. And Eric Olin was one hell of a hire.
Yeah, I think we all talked about that before the season. We thought he'd be a good hire. Well, it turns out he's doing even better than I thought he would do. They're way ahead of where I thought they'd be. They play 3 freshmen in their rotation, and all 3 freshmen, that might be their 3 best players. They are a very, very young and inexperienced team, and they are so connected on both ends of the floor. They are really, really good defensively. We saw it against CSU. They did get the benefit of not having to play against Kyle or Rashawn. But that being said, they're getting better and better, and they right now they moved into, I think they're 39th in the net now. They're moving into an at-large position pretty strongly, and I think Utah State's there. And like we said, San Diego State I think is still the class of the league, and we might be looking back at it goes from 1 to 3 bids pretty regularly. We might be looking at 3 right now with the emergence of New Mexico as a really solid, as we said, second place team in the Mountain West.
Steve, you are the man. Thank you so much for giving me so much of your time, for chopping it up, for giving me some of the best perspective on Mountain West hoops around. You'll have your post-game show tonight, right?
I will be doing a post-game show tonight starting at about 10:30, more likely 10:45 because they always delay the late night broadcasts. And then tomorrow night I'll be doing my Swolapalooza Thursday show with the gentleman from wyonation.com that we'll do a preview and we'll have some fun. We'll learn about each other's teams and we'll be nice to each other. He's a really good guy, and we'll have some fun. And then obviously post game, I won't be going up to Laramie. No plans to go to Laramie, but I'll do the post game show on Saturday night, and then obviously my Monday morning show, which you've been a part of, which you've gotten a coffee mug with, and then the other thing I'm enjoying doing, hopefully you've seen it, is I'm staying busy. The show I do with Jeff Grammer, the weekly Neek Awards, we're having fun doing that too, where we hand out awards to people who may have been slighted by the Mountain West, the weekly awards, named after Neek Clifford, who got slighted every week of the season until the very end last year. So I'm having fun doing it. But Justin, when you asked me to come on, I jumped at this. I love the show. I love what you're doing. You really, you are a phenomenal young person involved in this business, really doing some incredible content. So just to have me, I'm honored just to be on with you. Believe me.
The honor is all mine, Steve. Genuinely. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. Make sure you like, subscribe to all of Steve's content. There isn't anybody producing as much Mountain West Hoops content as him these days. We will be back live on Friday, or I should say. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Go Rams. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.